Wow, what a game, everyone. GG.
More like BG.
Sorry, what was that?
Bad game, James. BG. BFG.
Okay, whoa. Big friendly giant?
James, I don't like combos. I hate them. I hate it when the game runs out of nowhere, and I've told you so many times.
Walt, you won with a combo.
I know!
Oh, that is actually giving me genuine flashbacks to when you got your first win with the Kaza deck.
With the Kaza deck,
and
yeah.
It was like you were sat at the table. I have a photo of you on my phone after that game of me looking so mopey. And I was like, you won!
I look quietly satisfied, but also
disappointed in
definitely
yourself.
Definitely mopey, yeah. It's icky, you know.
Come to the dark side, Walter. Come and play with combo.
All right, welcome to the Get Commanded podcast. It's the GCP, brought to you by the GCC. I am your host, the Budget Boy. No, Captain Budget Boy. No,
Ooh.
It's just Walt.
Okay, well, hello, Commander Players. I've never done that on this podcast.
No, you haven't, actually.
Hello, Commander Players. It's me, James, your gracious co-host.
And before we have any more ridiculous conversations, James, we've got an incoming transmission.
I knew it. I'm expecting it now. We're 4 episodes deep now, so I'm expecting these guys to get in touch.
It just keeps on happening. So from the deep depths of the galaxy, from the Space Commanders, it's time to get commanded. At the conclusion of each game, consider what has occurred and plan your next steps.
Oh, okay. This is like... We've spoken about a lot before the game. You and I are a huge Rule Zero person.
Yeah, big fans of Rule Zero.
And we love the game itself. And we've spoken about communication. We've spoken about play styles.
How you have fun within the game. Yeah.
And this is after the game now?
Yeah. I guess this is almost like the anti-Rule Zero.
So what are we calling it?
I've tentatively started calling it Rule Infinity.
Oh, of course, you're just working on a number line here. Rule Zero is starting
Zero at the start.
And just infinity
at the end.
And this is something we should always be thinking about.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
okay.
so there's a few things that we want to be thinking about. So the Space Commander said, consider what has occurred. So, look, Rule Zero starts the game. So I think that Rule Infinity should naturally call back to Rule Zero.
I think so.
I think it's almost like thinking about how... You can kind of think in your head, this is not so much what you're saying out loud, but how did the Rule Zero conversation go?
Yeah.
And so how could it have gone better?
Especially if you're moving into a next game.
Exactly. And look, most people play Commander and they finish the game and then play again with the same people. So if something went great, we want to do that again. If something didn't go so well, we also want to avoid that. So now is our little, 1 minute conversation tidbit where we're going to try and make the next game even better, if we can.
So we're going to record a 45-minute podcast about that 1 minute experience.
Pretty much. I mean, they did say as well, and plan your next steps beyond that. So
I think that's a lot longer. And when you finish a game, you're thinking about certain games you played for weeks afterwards.
You are.
Yeah. So
you are. So that's a separate part of the conversation. But yeah, so Rule Infinity. So, well, before we even do Rule Infinity, I think it's worth saying good game. I think a lot of people just seem to skip it, but it's just a nice little step.
Yeah.
I actually, now in our slightly less COVID-y world, appreciate a handshake every now and then.
Or a fist bump.
If people are
fist
comfortable.
Bump, elbow bump.
Elbow bumps as well, much more COVID safe.
I think the good game part of it as well is actually giving a throwback to episode 2 of this podcast, which is communicating. And I think that we spoke about it a lot, about being a gracious player and being a good player, and how that can actually benefit you in your games. Because Commander's a political game. Being nice gets people on side.
It does.
So,
does.
If you're interested in that, definitely go back to the last episode where we spoke about that. But yes, a handshake, good game. And also, I love it when I win and someone compliments the win or compliments the way I won or something like that.
Yeah.
I love that. It makes me feel like I did something right. It fluffs my feathers and boosts my ego a little bit, which I love. But it also actually gives me an education on my deck. If someone said, if we sit down at the game and I cast a new card, like, for example, maybe Hunter's Insight, which I put in my Elves deck, and I hit someone and I draw 30 cards, and at the end of the game you go, I didn't know 3 mana could draw you 30 cards if you cast that on your commander in instant speed before damage. That's a really good play. I go, brilliant. I know that that's a good thing to include in my deck.
Yeah, which again calls back to that same episode, the episode 2. We talked about that. I, again, stand by what I said in that episode. The best compliment that I can receive after a Commander game is someone enjoying the specific card that I put in the deck.
Yes.
Because, I made that choice when I put that in, and I'm rewarded, basically.
And I also, for you specifically, Walt, I love pointing out the weird cards that I'm like, I've never heard of this card. I'm going to put it in my deck.
And that's what brings me so much joy.
That's like, if you ever play a game with Walt, and I guarantee if you play a game with Walt, there's going to be a moment where you go, sorry, can you explain what that card does?
What is Twiddle?
I have lost to Twiddle. If you, usually on this podcast when we mention a card, we read it. I'm not going to mention Twiddle. You look that card up. For the listeners, go home, look Twiddle up. I have lost to it. It is a silly card. I have lost to the card.
If you're playing around me, play Twiddle.
Yeah, there you go. It's not in many decks, but it's in yours.
It's good.
But it's that thing where you find clarity in what you're doing, especially if you're the winner. And even if you're not the winner, and even when you're talking to say good game to the winner, of course, because they won, but say to other people around you that, you did a great play there, I really love that. Or if you had a great political deal that came up, be proud of it. Have that moment with the player of being like, we totally knocked that person out because we teamed up and we worked together. And me casting a spell and you forking it to target them twice or something was so brutal. And doing that, it gives, because again, Commander is such a social game, and that's why that communicating episode went on for such a long time. Is because it's such a social game. So the game doesn't stop when you finish, when there's a winner declared and all the board state is restarted and the stack is removed. That's not when the game stops. And I think the Space Commanders are actually trying to get us to realize that, because Commander is such a social game, there's no official competition around it. It's not a sanctioned event. It's a game that's constantly happening. We rock up and we start talking about decks and deck teching. That's part of the game. I think that once you're in Commander, it's like, Commander to me isn't a game. It's a community, and it's definitely it's something bigger than just a game. Like, you play Standard, you shake the opponent's hand, and once you're off the stage at Las Vegas doing the Grand Prix, you walk away, and that's it. That's done. But Commander, I can't wait till there's a Command Fest in Melbourne so we can experience this and how big that community is. And I think going around and talking to people and congratulating them and saying good games, it's awesome. I love it. I cannot wait for that.
For sure. I totally agree with you. I think the social... When I think about my favorite games of Commander, I can remember the moments that happened, but I also remember exactly who I was playing with every single time, because it's so important. And, when I sit down to come to Commander now, I found I was getting so invested in how my deck performed that at the end of the night, I could basically describe whether or not I had a good time based on whether I'd won. And that's not how we want to be playing Commander.
That's really concerning.
Yes, and I was concerned about it. And so what I started to do was reframe it in my mind, where I kind of said to myself, what if when I went and played Commander, I kind of actively turned off the part of my brain that was thinking about the format Commander. And I just said to myself, for an hour or 2 hours, 3 hours, I'm going to go and hang out with some people.
What a good way of approaching our Commander night.
It's just like, and what I found was happening then is I would sit down and I would just kind of be like, well, I'm about to spend an hour with this person. I want to know what they like.
Yeah.
I want to know a bit more about them.
Social game.
Definitely want to know their name.
Yeah.
Could start.
Yeah.
Could start. When
name, pronouns, then you get to play.
Then who's your commander? Yeah. Commander's pronouns. Yeah.
Which is important. Imagine,
if you know them, I don't know.
Yeah. You want to make sure if you're talking about the card, you want to make sure
It's true. Yeah. It's true. People do get that wrong, actually.
But I think it's really interesting because our last episode, we defined you as a spike. So it's and like, this is the thing, when you're not playing Limited and you're not playing Pauper, I think it's good to suppress those spike tendencies that come out in us, that we think we have a good time when we win is not necessarily the truth.
I think it's the wrong mindset to bring to Commander. Because look, if you are at a good pod, if you're at a pod where you've matched your decks perfectly in the Rule Zero conversation, the power levels are similar, people have similar expectations of the game, you should have a 25% chance of winning that game.
Yes, that's how it should be.
Which means you should only win a quarter of them. So if you're going to be devastated every time you lose a game,
if you play 4 games a night and you've only won one, that's the statistical outcome, actually.
Yeah, that's the most likely outcome. If the games are, the right power level and stuff, which is what we want, right? Out of Commander, we talked about this before. And so if you're thinking about Commander as, that's where I go when I want to win, you're going to be miserable. And that's kind of how I was finding I was feeling. I was kind of get to the end of Commander night and go like, man, I wish I'd done this play then. And I'd wish that I had this card instead of this other card. I'm going to have to swap some cards when I get home. And I still do a little bit of that. And I'm always going to be a bit like that because, as we discovered, I am a spy.
Yes, you are. But if you've not listened to episode 3, go back.
Yeah, go find out. Go find out. I guess we've kind of spoiled that now. That was sort of a bit of a realization we made on the fly.
But the rationale is there. You have to find out why Walt's a spy.
It's a good episode. And
look, I want to kind of highlight something that we've actually recently done on our community group. We have a closed community group page for all our community members to discussions. We have content going up. This podcast is posted there. We've got weekly posts by yourself, by other members. And it's a great place. But we always just had this thing that every Tuesday was when we play Commander. But we never had a name for the night. It was just Tuesday nights or Commander night or something. We've actually now named it Commander the Gathering. And you think about the name of the game we play is Magic the Gathering. It's about the gathering is a word in it. It's such a social part of it. So when we talk about things like congratulating each other, trying to get a mindset that makes you positive at the end of it, I now want to switch our tone a little bit and talk about what happens when you didn't have a good game. And what's something that you can talk to players about when you've had, for example, this is a really easy one to say, a particular card. Hosing your deck, for example. I've sat in one of my memories of this kind of topic where someone has definitely not had a good game was actually with you, and I want to pick your brains about it. It was because we've mentioned your Arami deck, Graveyard, slamming Gary and winning with that combo was brilliant. But it was a very fresh deck when this memory occurred. And you just built it and you were very excited to play it. And we sat down at a pod and one of the players, Luke, who works at the store, brought out his Esper kind of control deck where there's lots of enchantments that sit around and control it. I can see you wincing now because you know exactly what I'm going to say. And there was a card, Rest in Peace, which is 1 and a white for an enchantment that says all graveyards are exiled and anything that goes into the graveyard goes into exile as well. I can't remember what the exact card reading is, but you basically saw that card hit the table and that was your game. It was done.
Oh, well, in my colours, I was running the one thing that can deal with enchantments, which is Feed the Swarm, and I think I'd already used it.
So it got exiled with it.
Oh, and I was just I can't play the game of Magic. I was desperately trying to make deals with people. There's nothing you can do, about certain cards that come down. And look, I will very briefly say, I think don't play Rest in Peace. I'm just going to go ahead and say, unless you're playing CDH, don't play a card that just hoses somebody, because as the person who's playing that card, you just lose. But look, if it's happened in the game, right? If I got to the end of the game,
and it's over now.
This has just happened, right?
This is over.
I've played a Rami, Luke's played Rest in Peace, it's happened. I get to the end of the game and be kind of like, man, when I pulled out my graveyard deck, I kind of would have appreciated if you'd said, hey, I run a Rest in Peace in my deck.
It will turn off your deck.
Yes. Or, even if I hadn't provided that context, these days, I know we had that whole conversation about what we think is helpful to say at the start of the game. Yeah. I think the most important one is which cards are actually problematic in your deck. If you've got some experience. New players just sometimes make...
Of course.
It just happens. Yeah. They play their Rest in Peace. They didn't realise how bad it would be. They saw an EDH rack,
I have an experience of sitting down with a new player just recently that had 3 land removal spells in their deck.
Right.
And it was a new player experience. And it's one of those things where you go, right, this kind of thing...
It's a bit of a faux pas. Yeah, people don't really like it so much.
Exactly right.
Yep. So that does happen. But, in general... If you've been playing Magic for a certain amount of time, you kind of know the cards. Yeah. If you've got a Draenith Magistrate in your deck, you should know that some people are going to kind of see that card and be like, ugh.
If you're playing, and especially, you said it before, if someone at the table goes, during the Rule Zero conversation, and we're talking about the start of the game now, but this is where you can avoid it, and we'll talk about how we can solve it if it happens. But in those Rule Zero conversations, when you sit down and someone's going, oh, I've got this Savine the Reclamation deck, which is a flashback deck, and you have a Draenith Magistrate. Going to hose them. Let them know.
Let them know.
They
might want to pull out a different deck.
Yeah.
You might want to pull out a different deck. That's what that Rule Zero is for. Yeah. And so if that Rule Zero conversation wasn't as long as it should have been, then maybe in this Rule Infinity conversation, now's the time to sort of be like, hey, I would have appreciated if you'd warned me about that Rest in Peace.
Yeah.
there's a particular tone that you should go about doing it. It's kind of like
polite,
that. Yeah, you know, don't ever accuse people of like,
you made my deck terrible.
You did this, you did this, you did this. I think that's why it's good to focus on the card, is because then people don't really feel like they're being attacked directly. You can sort of be like, hey, I would have appreciated it if you warned me about that card.
And look, and as someone that has run cards like that has hosed, like I've been responsible for making some people's games miserable. I have, believe it or not, I've hosed.
I was just going to say, me included.
Or maybe we'll have a
long
chat.
Time ago.
Let's have a chat after the podcast when we're not being recorded.
Another Rule Infinity Rule Infinity for the podcast.
I think that's just therapy for us, actually. Because we play so much Magic, our Rule Infinity is just group therapy.
I mean, Rule Infinity minus the Magic is just kind of, hey,
how you doing?
How you going?
How you doing?
How
did you feel about that experience? How did it make you feel?
How did that make you feel? Have you seen... Sorry, crazy tangent. Freaky Friday... Oh. When they swap bodies, right?
Yeah.
And the mother is like a psychologist, and the daughter, it's like so bad, and I'm sure it's dated terribly, but like the daughter's way of getting through the day, where she's supposed to be a psychologist, is just whenever anyone says anything to her, she says, and how did that make you feel?
Next time, I'm not going to say next time because I've never done it, but the first time I cast an Armageddon, I'm going to go, and how did that make you feel?
Start the therapy right there at the trauma.
It's on the stack, not even resolved yet. How does this make you feel? But what I'm saying is, as someone that has blown people out of the water with their decks,
everyone's done it. Probably.
Everyone's done it, and especially when I love playing control. Like counterspells are one of those types of cards that people sometimes don't like playing against, and sometimes they get hosed by or whatever. It's when someone comes up to me and says that, I need to then rethink about when I pull that deck out, what pods I sit down in that deck with. And I'm really lucky because I have 12 commander decks now, I think. Maybe
sounds about right.
Roughly. It's bad that I'm losing count. But I have lots of range in my deck. So I have the ability to go, okay, maybe I won't play this at this kind of a table. But the next game I can pull out something easier. But I know that deck now doesn't belong at that table. But some other players only have one or two decks.
Yes.
And they've may have been a new player and they've upgraded it really quickly. I think as experienced Magic players, there's a responsibility to kind of guide people into the right pod. And like this podcast has its foundations in making sure that the result of Commander is that everyone has a fun time. That's what we're trying to do.
For sure.
So if we sit down at a table, let's say me, you, and two other people sit down, play a game of Commander, and your deck just completely annihilates and it just goes out all that kind of stuff. After the game, I might approach you and go, hey, look, that was really powerful and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of your responsibility as an experienced player to be like, right, I know that this deck shouldn't sit here. And let's put it on someone else. There might be a new player that sit there and they blow us out of the water. I might be able to say, hey, look, that deck is now really powerful. It's actually at the point where you might need to make a decision whether you go CEDH with it or keep it casual.
Yeah. Start with, this deck's really powerful,
and
guys.
Sit down.
Bring out your best deck.
And this is the thing, I've consistently, I'll give an example of one of our community members, Theo, has got an Edgar Markov deck, right? And they've put some upgrades in it. Vampiric Tutor.
On brand, one.
Yeah, Captivating Vampire. These kinds of cards that are, expensive
really
for a reason. They're really powerful.
Yep.
So, the deck now goes incredibly quick. So, I had this conversation with them where I was like, okay, you might need to start thinking about at casual tables, not pulling this deck out.
Or saying, hey...
Bring your A game.
This deck goes fast.
Yeah.
Bring out your best deck.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And then, and I think as experienced players, it's good for us to guide new players to the right pods. I've constantly sat down with people, and I might have only got two decks with me on the night. I've got my CDH deck and another powerful deck. And I sit down at a table. Someone said, "Hey James, come sit down, be our fourth player." And I sit down and go, "I've got these two decks." And the rest of the table isn't right for it. And then after the game, I win, and I'm like, "Oh, okay. Let me find you guys a pod that'll suit you better." And I stand up in the store and I go, hey, these guys are looking for a really casual game. Who's got pre-cons that they can pull out? And I think there's a responsibility on us to find the right pods for people.
Totally.
And I think a really easy way to do that is in this Rule Infinity conversation. After the game, you know exactly what their playstyle is and how powerful the deck is. So help them out.
Yeah, for sure. And look, the thing I think to keep in mind is, if you are the one who steps up and tries to have that slightly difficult conversation now, it doesn't have to be difficult, but it can be. If you have that conversation now, you might be the one who saves them from a less savory conversation with someone else.
Yeah.
Because like I unfortunately have seen it happen before where a newish player comes in and they have played land hate spells, you know? And an experienced player has just sort of thrown their hands up and like conceded the game and sort of said, I can't do this, don't do this, like all this kind of stuff. And, you know, if you can be the one at that table who instead says, hey, just by the way, people don't love land hate spells, just warn people before you play, then the next time they're better prepared for it, and hopefully you can avoid those really shocking conversations.
Something I've noticed about this conversation, we're like 20 minutes in already talking about this, and I found that the one thing that Rule Infinity does is make Rule Zero better.
It does.
I think that's like the underlying thing. It's how do we make Rule Zero better for you next time? Yeah. And I think this podcast is aimed at everyone new and experienced, and you know, spikes out there playing CDH. If you're a new player, talk to your opponents after the game, because you are still understanding your playstyle, your strategy, your deck power level. Talk to them, and also like, you know, if you have a problem with something, of course, we've talked about, like, I have a big problem with Rest in Peace. Don't play it, like, you know, warn me about that card. But if you're a new player and you play the deck and you go, hey guys, what did you think of my deck? What kind of power level is it at?
This is another good opportunity to get some feedback on how it went. Especially,
like, I'm a relatively experienced player and I've got lots of decks. If I build a new deck or bring a new deck to the table, after the game, love getting that feedback. Love being like, where do you think this sits, guys? Like, you know, like, this is my Fire Left deck. How do you reckon it went? Like, it's got Crucible of Worlds in it and a Raminap Actuator, but I only have 3 fetch lands. So what do you think that does for the power level? Like, what does this do?
For sure. And I think it's important to be, again, wherever you can, you should be the one who hops in. Because, like, again, in general, with Rule Zero, and I think it'll be the same thing when I'm going to try and, you know, look at this Rule Infinity thing. I think the things we talk about on the podcast, I almost think of as reminders to myself to do these things as well. In general, it's always going to be so easy to just say nothing, because everyone else is probably going to do the same thing. It happens a lot. People just kind of get up, they move, they do whatever, right? And so it's probably a lot of the time you're going to have to be the one who starts that conversation. But when you do, it all opens up then, you know, and if you start with that one little bit of feedback, then, you know, you can get an actual dialogue happening with the table, and you can learn something, you can see how that Rule Zero went, and then, you know, your subsequent Rule Zeros will be better. And a cool thing that I want to note about this here, I was thinking of the number line thing when I called it Rule Infinity, but also there are going to be infinite Commander games, theoretically, for you, right?
Yeah.
So let's make those infinite games better.
Yeah.
Moving forwards.
100%.
Yeah.
Man, we're killing it today. Like, the Space Commanders must be really proud of this, surely.
They must.
Like, the whole point of this podcast is to make people feel happier and all that kind of stuff, right? It's so rewarding.
For sure.
I'm really happy with this, like, the Rule Infinity conversation, because, it's very rare that we get this dialogue. And the reason why it's rare, and I'm going to throw a new topic of conversation in, it might be a bit of a tangent, but stick with me, is, do you think Rule Infinity, I want a yes or no from you, do you think Rule Infinity is as important as Rule Zero? Yes or no? All this, the eyes are closed, thinking hard. Or could be maybe.
I think as important, I think it's close.
It's close.
It's close.
Okay. Then if we think it's close to is as important as Rule Zero, is close to, then how do we feel about when you get eliminated, getting up and walking away from the table? Because then you're not part of that immediate Rule Infinity.
And you're sort of denying the other players access to your
feedback,
your input, your thoughts.
And like we've talked about, you know, some players conceding on the spot and walking away, and that's a different conversation. But if you have a good game and you just get knocked out and there's still maybe, I don't know, 3 turns left of the game, do you think as a player you have a responsibility to sit down and see that game out, like a game night style, like you sit there and still interact and talk to the table and all that kind of style? Or do you think you just can get up, walk away and find another pod?
Look, I think I would be in the first camp. I think in general, I want to see that game to the end, and I want to talk about it. And also, you know, I think it's also about a mindset thing where, you know, you should kind of care how it's going to wrap up. This again calls back to that same thing of thinking about it as hanging out with some people and not so much about the game. I want to see who wins. I want to see the smile on the face of the winner. And yeah, I want to participate in that rule infinity. I want to be like, hey, look, to be honest, I lean towards the positive. I know we've mentioned some negative things here and some ways you can approach that. But we started
with saying like, that was so good.
That was so good.
I love that play you made and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I want to be a part of that too. And this is the thing. We didn't really plan to talk about this. This is something that I wanted to bring up because I've seen it a lot in our store. On our Commander nights, the Commander the Gathering nights that we have every Tuesday, everyone wants to grind as many games as possible. So when you lose, it's an opportunity for you to go find another pod, right?
It is, yeah.
And there's part of that I totally understand. And I don't think we should disparage people from having another game or something like that. But if you can see the game ending, I think it's a good-hearted thing. It's not a rule. We're not trying to implement don't leave the table. It's your parents saying don't leave the table until your sister's finished eating.
That's a weirdly good comparison.
It's so accurate, right? But you might want to go and play Xbox, do something else, go find and do something else, or go get your after dinner snack kind of thing. But I think it's a really nice thing to sit down at the table and see it out. Also, I love when I've had an effect on the game that I get eliminated that I then see later on in the game. I love that experience where I go, the reason why you're experiencing this is because I removed that thing ages ago and now you don't have any cards in hand. I made that, so I made it harder for you to win even though I'm knocked out and you're still in the game. Suck it.
The ripples from your actions.
Exactly. And I think as as experienced players, you and I, we have that kind of responsibility to sit down and then be a part and almost initiate. For people that are listening to this podcast, a lot of them in our community, guys, start the Rule Infinity conversation. I think the more we talk about this, the more I think that, it's close to that importance level of Rule Zero.
Well, because it calls back to it so strongly. Yeah. You're always going to want to, or you should, I think about, what did happen in that conversation before the game and how could it have been done better? But look, we've been talking about this Rule Infinity thing for a while, and the Space Commanders did say, at the conclusion of each game, consider what has occurred and plan your next steps. So we do also want to think about how we're moving past Rule Infinity. So shall we do the paper?
We're holding the paper. I'm actually... There we go. And
I'm scrunching it!
I'm scrunching it because I want to get a target at the back of the room.
We have one very silent audience member back there who just copped a face full of paper.
We've got live participation in the podcast.
Oh my god. It's what's that? Remember 4D cinema?
Oh yeah.
I never even did one, but my friends would be like, oh man, I saw a 4D movie the other day.
There was bubbles coming out the screen.
The bubbles coming out, they spray water on your face or whatever when you go through the water. Oh my god. So yeah, the podcast is immersive now, guys.
Yeah. Please don't take that as Walt saying we're going to invite guests every
time.
No!
We're setting a precedent. People are going to think they can be invited. Subscribe to our OnlyFans.
Whoa, we've got an OnlyFans now. We're getting off track.
We're stopping this entire conversation. So, they can say, plan your next steps, was what the Space Commanders told us to do. So, we've got to think about how we're moving towards the next game of Commander after this one. So, look, we do play at a game store. A lot of our advice, I sort of think about our podcast as being, it's for our community, but I do think there's a lot to be gained from people in general because we're just talking about Commander and it's fun.
Yeah, 100%.
But look, we play at a game store. That's how we play. We occasionally play games in a pod where people just are invited over, but I would say 80% of my games of Magic are played at the game store that we go to on a Tuesday night. That's how we play Magic. So our advice on this is going to be...
based on a game store.
But
I think that's pretty common across the whole Commander scene. I think,
that's interesting. I feel like I saw a poll somewhere once. Maybe it was Twitter or something. Yeah. And they found... maybe it was Wizards. Maybe Wizards had done some surveys and stuff. Yeah. Okay. And I think most people actually play with a consistent pod in general.
Interesting, because we started like that in lockdown.
We did. Which is how we started Magic, really. Yeah.
So it was 100%. We played with the same pod over and over again. But now that actually happens very rarely. I think. So our advice on this will definitely be in the style of a game store setting or in the setting where you're playing with multiple people and you've got the opportunity to move around. So just keep that in mind when we're going through this section.
Yeah. So right off the bat, we talked about that game that happens where someone blows you out, right? And we talked about how you might want to give them some advice on that and even some help with where they should go next. And really, it's the same thing that you should be doing for you. Think about, where do you want to play next? Were you happy with the power level that was there, with the people who were there. Like, it's totally fine at this stage to be like, hey, I might duck out.
Yeah.
You don't have to say, I don't want to play with you anymore.
You guys made me lose.
I don't want to play with you anymore.
Wow. For anyone that doesn't know that reference, that's the original Toy Story.
Oh, that film is far too old.
Wow.
Well, anyway, that's... If you're a
old
Zoomer,
reference.
go watch Toy Story. It's great.
God, you made me feel old then.
Anyway, yes, that's... what am I even talking about?
Don't do that.
Don't tell people I don't
get
like
up,
you,
stamp
whatever.
your foot. This is a really good opportunity where if you feel swamped, and especially it might be, we've spoken about the situation where there's one player that goes boom, and I've been that. I was that player recently. I put out my Fire Left deck, and very quickly had these cards on field. You ready? Azusa, Lost for Seeking.
Right. Two extra turns a turn. Two extra lands a turn.
Raminap Excavator.
Played lands from your graveyard.
Yep. And Fabled Passage.
Which is a fetch land. So, for anyone who's not familiar with these kinds of loops, James sacrifices his Fabled Passage to get a basic land. The Fabled Passage goes to his graveyard. So with Raminap Excavator, he plays Fabled Passage as his second land for turn through Azusa.
Yep.
Cracks it, gets another land, does exactly the same thing a third time. Every single turn, assuming there's no interaction, James...
6 landfall triggers.
And
6 of them.
And ramps ahead 2 more.
Yeah.
Hits a land drop and then 2 subsequent lands every turn.
Yeah, it was brutal. And I've had that combo assembled a couple of times and whatever, but there could be situations where you're me and you blow people out of the water, or you could be in a situation where you bring a very low powered deck to a table that you're just not sat at, and you end up getting removed and you got nothing on board, and you realize this table isn't for me.
Yep.
So guys, I really, I enjoy watching your decks pop off, but I think I might need to find some people that will play at my level and all that kind of stuff. So move around, and specifically for our community members, it's as easy as standing up and going, game? Anyone looking for a pod? I need someone, or is anyone looking for a fourth?
Exactly.
Just switch it up.
Exactly. I do think start early, because people... in practice, the rule infinity conversation rarely happens. People just assume another game is happening right now. They start shuffling. They start planning their next commander,
especially in CDH pods. Oh boy.
Yes, and so if you haven't told them immediately that you're leaving, they're kind of already assuming that you're in, and then it can be kind of difficult to then be like, oh, I'm out, because then people have shuffled up, people have rolled to see who goes first. It's a harder conversation later on. So try and get in there quick and be like, hey, great game, do that rule infinity thing if you feel up to it, and then say, hey, I might duck out, might hop over there, might get some food, might get a drink, that kind of thing.
And I think as a general thing, you mentioned it before, that general assumption is that there's another game immediately after, because one of the things about Commander, it can last anywhere between 5 minutes and 2 hours. In our case, we've played
2 plus even.
Yeah, we've played Commander that we've gone, should we break for lunch? And we've left. Okay, the game restarts at the beginning of Walt's upkeep. That's where it's so there are games that there's that expectation where multiple games are happening, because in a store. Because your game finished doesn't mean everyone else is up to switching pods. So it's just easier for you to start a game.
Yes.
So I think there's a bit of an unspoken rule that happens when you're playing multiple games.
With the same people.
So you played one game, someone wins, congratulations, bit of a rule infinity convo, and then bam, let's jump into the next one. If you win, do you play the same deck again? Or do you immediately put it back in your box and switch it out?
I never play the same deck again.
Yeah.
It just feels wrong somehow. I think, especially if the game wasn't close.
Yeah.
But I think even just as a general rule, I think people kind of don't want to see it. If I think about myself in the other position where I'm the player who lost to the deck, I don't want to see that deck again as well, because I'm kind of I saw how that wins, I experienced the pain, all these things. I would like a new brand of pain that you can deliver to me, please. I think as a general rule,
instead of staxing me out over 9 turns, kill me with a combo on turn 2 this time. I want to switch it up a little.
I want something new, different.
Self-harm in the worst way possible. Getting doing that by getting people to beat you in Commander.
Yes, exactly. And look, if you don't have another deck, I guarantee at 95% of tables, someone has multiple decks.
Yes, and this is something else that I wanted to talk about in terms of planning for the next steps, in bringing different decks out. And we're now moving into the next game, or the next couple of games, the next week of games, right? If you've got one deck And that's it. And let's say it's a really, we talk about high powered decks a lot. Let's say it's a really low powered deck. Let's talk about, you like weird, casual, janky stuff.
It's a pre-con.
It's a pre-con, something like that. And then you find that it's really hard for you to get games where you enjoy it because you're sat at a table with lots of people doing powerful stuff, right? Have a think about how can I make this a little bit more powerful, or how can I sideboard a couple of cards out? And there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can keep the deck the same and sideboard a couple of cards in, or you can start a new deck and build a new deck, right?
Yeah.
And you can power that up. And also, can I make it clear that if you're a Magic player that doesn't have a huge disposable income to play on Magic, because let's face it, Magic is expensive, and especially if you want to buy powerful cards, it can get very expensive. You can build powerful budget decks. And I'm saying this specifically because you do. Like, you're our budget boy, so it is possible. And like, you go onto YouTube, you got like, YouTubers like
Commander's
the Commander's
Quarters.
Yeah. Even Jumbo Commander does some stuff with like budget upgrades.
There are also about 1 million pre-con upgrades videos out there. I can only assume that the YouTube algorithm loves those videos because like every really single channel does them.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have a pre-con and you want to upgrade it and you only got $50, I can guarantee you someone out there has made a video for your pre-con for $50 to upgrade your deck.
And I know, like, we've mentioned this podcast, I think, in every single episode of ours, but the Command Zone podcast, they do one for every deck.
They do. They've
done one for every deck. So, like, they're a really good place to start. So, if that's the situation, you've got a low-powered deck. Moving on to the other hand, if you're like, like I mentioned Theo before, like one deck at the moment, super high-powered. What can you do to now sit at tables more casually? There's a really simple answer to this. Buy a pre-con.
Yep.
It's not too expensive. You can get pre-cons for like $30. There are some that...
Some are even cheaper on sale and some even 20 kind of
find some online, all that kind of stuff. Buy a set of sleeves. Have that in a box ready to go. I actually also think if you're an experienced player, I think you have a bit of an obligation. Not like it's not guaranteed you have to do this, but I think it's really nice for you to do this. If you have a pre-con in your collection when you come to the store ready to go, for when there are players that are looking for a casual pod, less high-powered, you can say, I've got a pre-con. I'm ready to go. Let's do it. I myself have a pre-con always sleeved up and usually in my bag ready to go. And it's the Oboon deck.
The Nile Landfall. And you have one upgrade. And I know this because you said it so many times. And I'm shocked it wasn't in the deck originally. It's Felidar Retreat, which is the stupid busted card. So Landfall, it's like a 3 and a white for an enchantment. Landfall, either you put a +1 counter on every creature you control, they gain vigilance until end of turn.
Or make a 2/2 cat token.
Or make a 2/2 tack.
That's a tack coating now. Like tack coating.
A tack coating? A tack coating!
Jesus.
This is a strange episode.
Clearly moving into the end of the podcast now. But like I think that's a really easy way for experienced players to
be supportive of new players coming to the store. And
especially considering now we're talking about, we talked about the rule infinity conversation. Now we're moving into the next steps. Think about what decks you're going to bring next Commander night, next Commander the Gathering night. What decks are you going to bring? Because I've had situations where I've come to the store and I've realized very quickly, oops, I brought too many high-powered decks. Right. I didn't have enough variety for a casual game. It was all super high-powered. So, I go home, immediately switch out. I've got a Super Hive box by Ultimate Guard, so it's just like I have 4 decks in there that I can switch out.
Yep.
And I just go, right, these 2 decks I played a lot tonight, let's switch these 2 out for some low-powered decks. That kind of stuff.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to go. I think Tolarian Community College, the professor is actually really strong advocate for every Commander player owning a pre-con, which let's be honest, there's lots of people who are new, but most people who've been playing Commander for a while have probably spent a fair amount of money. Even me, who builds budget decks, the number of budget decks I have now,
you up to 15 or something. How many you got?
13 decks. Okay. So like it adds up, and so a pre-con is maybe $20-$30 for the deck. 10 for sleeves. You're set pretty much.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing to have in our collections, because we are, again, a gathering. And like we said at the start of this podcast, Commander is not just a game, it's like a lifestyle. It's like, when people say skating isn't just a sport, it's a lifestyle. Like Commander's a very similar thing, right? So I think
state of mind.
We have this responsibility for new people coming into our community to let them in and show them how wonderful this game can be, and not just have them sit there and have a miserable time.
How nice. That was very similar to the Rule Infinity thing, where we really emphasize that, you know, you have the power to make your games better.
100%.
So do it. And look, that's all fantastic in terms of moving towards the next game. But the other thing that I want to call back to again, I actually use these same words, but I'm thinking about it in a different way. Space Commander said, plan your next steps. And yes, your next steps will, in the immediate future, include your next games. But also, calling back again to Rule Infinity, there are going to be more games beyond the ones that you'll play even tonight, right? Sure. So you should plan your next steps, and in that, you should think about how your deck is going to play the next time you play it. And what I'm talking about here is, think about how your deck played.
Ooh, or we're dipping into Walt Spike territory here. Are we about to go on Mox Field and assess the mana curve of everything and see what we're looking at? Is that the kind of assessment you're looking at?
I'm not thinking... Oh, man. Maybe you think about mana value. It's something I would think about. Maybe I'm not going to recommend people think about mana value. You'll go nuts like I do. But, you know, like, think about how the cards in your deck performed in the game.
For sure. I think that there's, like, for example, you know, I very rarely sit down and upgrade my decks with a specific intent. Like, I'll be like, oh, this is a fun card. Let me slot it in here and see how it does. After the game, if I've played that card, I want to have a good think about how did it do? And, you know, one of those examples I love, I was like, so my Brutaclar deck, which you mentioned on this podcast. We
have before, yeah.
Very weird, wacky, James makes tokens
kind of thing,
bizarre.
Yeah.
And I put a Port Razor in it. Have you heard the card?
I have, because you play it.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I think it's 3 red for a Ogre Pirate.
That sounds right, yeah.
I don't actually have my phone to Google.
I think he's a 4/3. For some reason that sticks out in my mind.
Anyway, basically, the whole card reads, if you hit someone with him, you get to untap all other creatures and have another combat phase.
So it's intentionally worded in a way where it's supposed to be balanced.
Yes.
Because, you know, yes, you attack with your Port Razor, yes, you get your extra combat, but oh no, Port Razor already attacked, it is untapping all the other creatures.
So he can't attack again.
He can't attack again, we get this extra combat, but that's going to be it.
But this is James's Brutaclar deck.
I was just going to say...
So I figured out a way that if you make a token of Brutaclar, token of Port Razor, and you have enough tokens to go wide enough, you can stack all these extra combat steps on your turn. And then not only that, because Brutaclar produces a token at the beginning of each combat.
Oh my god, you net a Port Razor every time. You get one more.
Correct.
So you just goes.
Yeah. So, and there was like, it was one of those times where, and it was also one of those moments where I was like, whoops, I went infinite. But it was one of those times where that was one of those test cards that I thought, it's a kind of combat face deck. Never thought about it as like a potential token. Like, I genuinely didn't think about it. And when it was being played, it kind of came out. So after the game, I saw that card and went, I might tutor for this card when I get the opportunity to.
Right.
If I've got a Mimic Vat on field, I might block with it so I can put it under Mimic Vat so I can get the token. It genuinely revolutionized how I play that deck. And I definitely, again, when I realized it did that, I evaluated the power level of that deck too. And
this is probably a Rule Infinity kind of thing that you would say, 100%. Right? Where you'd look at it and go, you wouldn't look at it. You'd say to people, hey, sorry about that. I did not even realize I had this in the deck.
And thankfully, when it happened, I actually remember the specific game I was in. It was with Frank, who's our vice president of our committee, and Jordan as well, who we've mentioned on the podcast. That's also on our committee. And both of them gave me a brilliant Rule Infinity conversation afterwards. They were like, that was insane. How did you figure out how to do that? That was wild. Awesome. It was great. Can you not play that deck again? we're going to play something else. Let's lower it down a little bit. Cool. I want to test something out. So I think that's a really good, example of when you see a card that does really, really well. Yes. But there is the opposite to that.
You can think about how I just lost.
Yeah.
I dropped this, oh my god. I can't think of a card. You play a card.
Yeah.
There's a card in your deck. And you...
deck with a card as well.
It's at least one. Yeah. And you played it, you dropped it, and the next turn, you kind of look at it, and you're like, this did absolutely nothing.
I'll get, for example, Zendikar Resurgent, big mana thing. You spend your entire turn casting Zendikar Resurgent, and it does nothing on the turn you put it down. And then it gets round to you, and now you've lost 20 life because you should have put blocks down, someone swung at you or something like that.
Yep.
You look, did that really make the worthwhile play? or is it one of those big splashy cards that I think I like the idea of? Are you a Timmy? Are you a Timmy and you've just included that in your deck because you're a Timmy?
Well, yeah, you can temper all of these thoughts with the notion that, I know what kind of game I want to have. So, maybe sitting there casting Zendikar Surgeon and going, ooh, next turn, ooh, next turn, ooh, next turn. Maybe that's how you want to play Magic. That is very Timmy, I think. Again, calling back to the last episode. But, if you're not that way inclined, you might drop that card and be kind of like, man, actually, I think I'd rather sub that out for something else.
Yeah.
And I think it's also worth thinking about how you might have lost previously with the deck. And see if you're falling into a bit of a pattern. Like, I've got decks now where I've kind of realized that they pop off in such a rapid way. Like, they don't, win the game on the spot, but they kind of go from nothing to something so quickly that people just kill me. Like, my Around Me deck, people just kill me. They see my bin full of cards. They can see my Around Me with a Swiftfoot Boots on there, so they can't get rid of Around Me. Like, I've got the means, I've got the mana, it's gonna happen. They just swing big dragons at me and I die.
Yeah.
So what I put in the other day, I put in Noxious Gear Hulk.
Do you want to explain? I actually can't. Is that the black?
It's the black Gear Hulk, so it's 4 black, I think. Yeah, 4 black.
I think all of them are 4 black, yeah.
Yeah, like 4 and then the mana values. Yeah, I think there's one for every color.
Yeah.
Anyway, when it enters the battlefield, it's like a 5/4 with menace artifact creature. When it enters the battlefield, destroys target creature, you gain life equal to its mana value, I think. Or maybe it's toughness. Anyway, you gain some life from it.
A little bit of life gain in the deck that constantly gets punched.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and it's actually more than a little bit because Around Me makes 3 copies of something.
Ooh.
So when you pop that down, with Around Me,
you
blow
life.
up. Yeah, you could comfortably gain 20 life in that go.
That
so
is nice.
I
like that.
I think it's just fun in general. But I was also kind of like, okay, I'm dying to combat damage. Maybe a bit of life gain isn't bad,
And this is I have another example of one of my decks. My Yuriko deck needs combat damage to trigger it. And I found Merrin players found a really easy way around this. They love having a Spore Frog in the bin that they can consistently reanimate to stop Yuriko dealing combat damage to so the ninja trigger doesn't go on the stack and blow everyone out of the wall. So I found that I might need Graveyard Hate in the deck to interact, because I've thought the only ways I've lost with my Yuriko deck is when people stop me from getting that combat damage happening. So I thought, okay, I'll chuck a Tormod's Crypt in there or a Bajuka Bog, just a 1 2 off. And then, after I play that a couple of times, again, Rule Infinity, have an assessment. Did it work? Sometimes I'll flip that Tormod's Crypt off the top of the library and it's a 0 CMC spell. And I'm like, that's not good for Yuriko. I don't want a 0 CMC card in it. So your Tormod's Crypt's no longer in my deck. I've tried it.
Wow,
had a bit of assessment.
there you go.
Not the right thing.
That's been there for so long, and I can remember very many times where someone was like...
you built Merrin, Walt.
I know, but no, I can remember those, but more importantly, I can remember when we started playing at the store. Like, we moved out of our lockdown times of playing, me, you, and our housemates, and we moved instead to playing at the store. Yeah. And so we kind of brought our idea of how Commander should be played to the store. And so I can vividly remember at least 3 times someone's been like, James, why is there a Tormod's Crypt in your deck? And you're like,
Spore Frog.
Merrin, Spore Frog. I can't get through Spore Frog. I can't beat it.
So I need this one specific card.
So
I think that's a really good, we've shown an example, and in this case, we've shown the middle ground. We've shown an example of when you evaluate your deck of how it lost or how it won, rewarding those cards, or again, taking the cards that lost you the game out of the deck.
Yeah.
And so again, this is, the Space Commanders have told us we need to prepare for that infinite amount of Commander games that we might play in the future. How can we A, have more fun with it, and that's what we talked about with all the social stuff, and how can we B, make our decks better? How can we have a better game? How can other people have a better game?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Completely agree. All right. Well, question for the listeners. How was your last Commander game? And would a Rule Infinity conversation have helped you have a better one afterwards?
I think that's a good question. I'm keen to hear feedback, and I'm going to add another one. What was a Rule Infinity conversation that you had that really helped?
Yeah.
Let's help each other out here. What was a question that you asked that really changed how the next game happened?
For sure.
Or what was a statement that you said?
Yeah, 100%. Well, now we're on to our... every episode, we do have this segment at the very end. It's the Play of the Week.
I'm so excited. Yes, I do have one. And it comes from the realm of CDH in our store. And I'm really keen to talk about this one. I say I'm keen to talk about it, but honestly, my emotional capacity at the time to play it was a little thin. My CEDH deck is Niv Mizzet Perun, and it's a Control Curiosity combo deck. If you don't know what that means, have a quick Google of it. There's basically an infinite combo that sits with Niv Mizzet in the command zone. So it's wants to win pretty quickly, and I'm not sure if the listeners know this, but I've got a turn 1 win with that deck before.
James will not stop telling everyone at the store about this turn 1 win. It's become a joke at this point.
I am actually going to get a t-shirt with "Ask me about my turn 1 win."
Oh my god, can that be our merch? When we inevitably make merch, I want a, did you hear I got a turn 1 win?
Yeah, ask me about my turn 1 win.
Ask me about my turn 1 win, that one's fine.
Okay, so for the listeners, what James phrase would you like on a t-shirt? Is it "Hello Commander Players" or "Ask me about my turn 1 win"?
Surely we could get both of them in there.
All right. We'll do multiple things. We're not promising anything, but in the future. So let me set the scene for you. We sat we were sat at a CDH table, and obviously CDH Rule 0 is actually a pretty efficient conversation. We're playing CDH here. Pick your powerful decks. Let's go. So I said, okay, did my introduction. This is Niv Mizzet Perun's control combo deck. Fantastic. Went and politely gestured to the player across from me, which is a very amazing player in our community, David. Love him to bits. And he just slams the deck on the table and puts a card down. He's got multiple CDH decks, so I didn't know which one he was playing. And he just put Grand Arbiter down. You know the card. Makes
Grand Arbiter Augustine the 4th?
I think it's the 4th.
Yeah.
Big boy that says, I'm going to help my player out and just make everything miserable for everyone else at the table. It says basically the card reads, your spells cost 1 less, everyone else's spells cost 1 more. So it's a stacks deck. And I was like, fantastic, brilliant. Okay, I'm control deck. I might be able to win before that gets off. Go to the next player, and it's Luke. And Luke's playing an Izzet Dragon as well, but it's Galazeth. It's, Mum, can we have Urza? No, we have Urza at home.
Urza at home, yeah.
That's Galazeth. So, but it's a red-blue, so you can do some really cool stuff with Underworld Breach. He's got, like, the main win con for Luke is the Underworld Breach Brain Freeze combo, where you mill yourself out that way. It's really cool to watch. Anyway, I'm like, oh, sweet, another combo deck at the table. We'll be able to grind some games out here. Fantastic. Luke passed the Rule 0 conversation to our next player, and it was Jovan. And Jovan was playing a Thrasios Timna deck, 4-color control.
Interesting.
4-color control, just like Thassa's Oracle Demonic Compensation win at some point, who knows?
Right.
So it was a bit...
Wants the game to go long kind of thing.
So there was 2 Izzet players sat there going, I want to win on turn 2, turn 3, let's go. I'm keen to grind out 15 games here, I'm so excited. And then the 2 other players were like... Get the popcorn, we're going to be here for a while. And boy, did they win. I played a CD... So I've constantly... Like the joke is, I consistently brag about my turn 1 win.
Yep.
I had to sit down at that table, that CDH game, for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours.
I think it was longer. I was in the store at the time. I think that was the only game you played.
It was the only game I played that night.
I feel like you sat down at like
6:30,
6:30 and like... I think it wrapped up at a time where, because our store closes at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And so I think it wrapped up at a time where you were like, I can't be bothered playing another game, which means it must have been in the last hour.
Close
it must have been like 9:15,
nearly
9:30.
3 hours.
Yeah.
So like, you can tell the time dilation just set in and it started happening. But one of the reasons why, and this is my play of the week, and the reason why it's my play of the week is because every single person at that table laughed incredibly hard about it, and it made the game so much more bearable because it was so funny.
Yeah.
And this is, again, the podcast is all about making great interactions happen, playing Magic better, playing Commander better, and having a good time.
Yeah.
So this is what happened. David, turn 2, plays a Plains after he played an island on turn 1. So he's got 2 mana, a white and a blue. What does he do? Tap both of them. I'm like, oh, he's playing something. What it could be? Swiftfoot Boots, ready for Grand Arbiter? No. Drannith Magistrate. Here's the table. And it's like, oh my god.
I guess we have mentioned this a couple of times, I should say.
So Drannith Magistrate is a card that it's a 1/3 cleric, I think. But it basically says your opponent's keep thing, your opponent. So when you cast it, you can do everything. It says your opponents can't, but it says your opponents can't cast cards from anywhere else but their hand.
Really important note here. So it was in Ikoria. It was supposed to stop people doing graveyard shenanigans, that kind of thing.
In Commander,
your commander is in the command zone.
That's not in your hand.
Nope.
You can't cast your commander. And for someone...
it's turn 2. It's a 2-mana spell.
And for someone that is playing a Niv Mizzet Perun deck, which half of your combo is in the command zone... I just looked at this card and I was like, I need to remove it. But I specifically kept a hand because it had a lot of mana acceleration so I could get to Niv Mizzet quickly. So I didn't have any removal, counters, anything like this. I kept a hand. I kept a greedy hand because I wanted to go fast. This is not the play that made everyone laugh. Believe it or not. When a Drannith Magistrate hits the table, usually people don't go, oh, what a funny play. This is the play that happened. So that was turn 2, right? There's another 2-mana card. that some people might know from CDH, but that's 1 and a blue. Gilded Drake. Do you know the card?
When it ETBs... You exchange control. So you give your Gilded Drake to someone, you take something of theirs.
Correct.
Important note, because I think it comes up often with this card compared to other similar effects. It's a very old card.
It's a very expensive card too.
It is a very expensive card. I think it's for this main reason. Unlike other effects, most cards these days say, until you lose control of this or something. This is forever.
This is like you gain control of it.
If you blow up someone's Gilded Drake after they swapped... if you blow up the Gilded Drake that they gave to you after they took your Draneth Magistrate, for instance, nope, that Draneth Magistrate just belongs to that person till the end of the game.
Oh, yeah.
And you found this out, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, Jovan cast the Gilded Drake. Right. Jovan has an incredible CDH list. It's a very expensive deck. Got dual lands in it. It's beautiful to watch. Cool. His board state sometimes costs more than my car. It's phenomenal. And so the Gilded Drake hits the table. So naturally, he takes the Draneth Magistrate. Gilded Drake goes to David.
Sure.
And then Jovan sat there happy. Me and Luke are still like, yeah, that doesn't change anything for us. We're still your opponent. Sucks. We're still sucking.
Yeah.
And then I draw my next card. It's a Phyrexian Metamorph. I can get my own Gilded Drake.
Oh my god.
So then I play my Phyrexian Metamorph, which enters the battlefield as a Gilded Drake, which then I nick the Draneth Magistrate from Jovan, and it comes to my board.
Pass the parcel, but it's Draneth Magistrate.
It hit everybody's board. Later in the game, Luke managed to get a clone effect that copied Draneth Magistrate, and then the original died. So it was like, oh god, man, this was like a hot potato Draneth Magistrate, and it happened for about, like, it was a control game, so it was like we were on turn 6 or 7, and the thing had just been circling around the board.
Oh, wow.
It was hilarious, and I actually think at the end of the game, luckily we said, is the Draneth Magistrate in the right person's deck? And thankfully David had pink sleeves, so it was very obvious, like, that's his card, we need to return it. So my play of the week is a hot potato Draneth Magistrate in a 3-hour CDH game.
Wow.
That was I was when we did the raffle at the store, you saw me, I was tired. It was a long game.
James, I know when James has reached a certain level of exhaustion with the game, when he leaves.
Yes.
Leaves the game. He walks over to me and he's like eyes basically melting. Like, hey, Walt, I've just been in this CDH game for like 3 hours, man.
Have you got any snacks?
Yeah. It sounds like you smoked like 1,000 cigars. Like, hey, Walt, I've been playing this game for the last 45 years.
I'm too old for this shit. So my play of the week is a CDH game that went for 3 hours, was unbearable, but a hot potato Draneth Magistrate, an evil stacks card, made it funny. That's my play of the week.
Nice. Good stuff. And look, if you were in a regular game of Commander, you might get to the end and have your Rule Infinity conversation and say, hey, don't play Draneth Magistrate. I hate that card. Stop it. Stop it right now.
What an incredible way to sum up this podcast. In other
Don't
words,
do that like that.
The message is Draneth Magistrate is a horrible card, but have conversations after your games.
Yeah,
that's the whole podcast. We managed to get that message across in an hour. What a good job.
There you go. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you in the next one.
Hey! Thank you for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Catch you then.
Bye.